You all welcome back to African Colonization TV and Biafran History. On today's video, we'll go into the issue concerning Africa and Europe. So on today's topic is how the Europe drew African map and took its gold, oil and power. Don't skip any part of the video, try to watch it to the end so that you understand everything concerning the African continent and the Europe, how the Europe fights on African land finally took the power and how they drew African map. Because what you are seeing today, it is not the main map that was drawn before the white man came into Africa. So there's a lot to say and there's a lot to learn about it and the slave trade and how everything went through when they are coming into African continent. And before they came into, African has been a civilized country before then. Then they now came, everything now changed. The Europe you are seeing, the Britain you are seeing today, they are just small people living in Asian continents. So, but at the end, they find their way into African country. Then starts the issue of colonization and other things. And as finally, they now grab the power, grab the oil, and grab the resources of the people, start controlling them the way they want. So, in fact, it's full of a lot and a lot to learn. Don't skip any part. As you're about to watch, like, subscribe, and make sure you share the video to go and let others see and learn from this. Because this man you are seeing is going to explain to us a lot concerning the Africa and the continent at large, how everything started and how everything become so to date. Everybody is still thinking how and where is African real map. So watch it to the end.
The world you live in today was sketched on paper by European men who looked like me. Men who at first were just curious and adventurous, but soon whose motives morphed into an insatiable greed, a confidence that their way was better than everyone else's. This confidence led to arguably the most influential series of events in human history, at least the history that affects you and me. A 500-year project of moving people and weapons and germs and language and violence to every corner of our earth. And in the process, gathering and taking home stuff to make them richer. Metal, rubber, tea, sugar, and human bodies. This isn't a history lesson. You won't hear me talk a lot about dates and names. Instead, this is the first of 3 videos where I want to show you how this happened. How Europe, a continent full of poor, miserable farmers, took over the entire world. And in the process, they shaped it. They shaped it to their way of thinking and speaking and doing things. So this is part 1 of how Europe stole the world. Yes, I'm going to be looking at a lot of maps to understand this issue because drawing on the map is how they did things. To understand how Europe stole the world, we need to rewind to back when the map looked a little different. Hold on. Back in like 1450, the world map looked like this. I mean, Europe was just a bunch of smaller kingdoms. The borders look so different than they do today. They were all pretty small potatoes. Well, actually, there actually were no potatoes. Those wouldn't arrive to Europe for another 50 years. But the fact is, there wasn't an abundance of anything in Europe. Instead, Europeans were just farmers barely scraping by, constantly in debt to a few rich landlords. Life in Europe was scarce and miserable. Meanwhile, there was a bunch of other empires around the world that were thriving. There was this big empire over in the Middle East, they had silk, and then over here in India you had a big empire with spices and luxurious cotton fabrics. Then of course there was the big dynasty in China that had by this time already invented gunpowder, porcelain, and really sophisticated ships that they could use to sail around the world. Oh, and all of these empires were trading with one another, making all of them even richer. They all had better everything than Europe did, and miserable Europeans eventually wanted in on all the trade. So that's kind of the context here that sets the stage for Europe taking over the world. The first two countries that wanted in on all this trade and set out to explore were the countries that today we know as Spain and Portugal. So they start looking for a land route to get them east. They start moving east and nope. Oh look, it's the Ottoman Empire, a very powerful Middle Eastern empire that's run by Muslims. Meanwhile, Spain and Portugal are hella Catholic and they're not being super nice to Muslims or Jews. So the Ottomans are like, no, we're not gonna let you pass through our land to get in on the trade in the east. Oh, and by the way, you can't even afford our taxes. You're miserable Europeans without a lot of money, so go away. They're gonna need another way to go east. Portugal's workaround was literally to go around the continent of Africa, stopping along the coast to trade with the wealthy African empires along the way. This is a huge moment because it actually worked. It's near the end of the 1400s, and the Portuguese are now going nuts. They're sending ships around this route that they figured out, trading with the East. And suddenly the Portuguese are dressing in luxurious fabrics. They're using cloves and cinnamon and black pepper to make their food actually taste good. Wait a minute, you're telling me they didn't have black pepper before this? Jeez, miserable indeed.
You must have some peppers.
So the age of exploration has begun. Miserable Europe is doing something about their situation, going out to get in on the thriving trade in the East. But remember, this isn't about conquering land, it's about trading. For now. Okay, so now Spain sees Portugal hitting the jackpot and they're kind of jelly. They want in on this too. They need to establish their own trade route to Asia, but they wanted to do things a little bit differently. Instead of following Portugal's lead and going around Africa, they listened to a pitch from this Italian sailor. And this sailor wants them to fund his new startup called What If We Sailed West to Get to Asia Instead of East? Super promising name. Now remember, at this point, people in Europe thought that the world looked like this. The logic was like, oh, we can just hop over to Asia by going this other way. So Spain was like, yes, great idea, high risk, high return, do it, Columbus. Well, it turns out the world does not look like this, and instead, over here, there are a couple of massive continents that Columbus ran into. But like many of us confident white dudes, Columbus was like, yeah, I know exactly where I am. We're like in the Indies right now. Like over those guys over there, those are Indians. Yep, I can feel it. But instead, he was like in Cuba. But despite the mansplaining, Columbus kind of found exactly what he was looking for and more. Great empires with rich culture and food and precious metal that weren't available to him back home. He was right on target. So he's like, all right guys, let's trade. But then he's like, wait a minute. These people don't have armies or navies protecting their stuff. So this must be kind of a different place. Different land with different rules. And this is where the biggest light bulb moment of the century goes off in this guy's head. Change of plans, boys, says Columbus. We're going to claim this land. And everyone was like, wait, what? You heard me, we are claiming this land. And the boys are like, wait, weren't we here to like trade with great empires? Portugal's been doing this for like all these years and getting rich. And he's like, no, they don't have armies. They're just letting us show up and like be here without a fight. So obviously that means they don't mind if we just like claim the land. I mean, I'm taking some creative liberty here on like explaining what Columbus was thinking, but like, look at the letter that he wrote. Here's the letter that Columbus wrote back to the king and queen, reporting on what he saw. he writes back saying that he discovered many islands inhabited by numerous peoples, and then I took possession of them for our most fortunate king, making public proclamation and unfurling his standard, his flag, with no one making any resistance. No one making any resistance. Spain and Portugal set out to trade. They set out to explore and understand and get in on the global economy. But Columbus's realization was instead of trading, they could actually just claim land for themselves. And this changed everything. After all, no one was making any resistance. This moment is the foundation upon which all European imperialism grows. I'll show you. It's the moment that would give us the first big division in the minds of Europeans, the thing we wrote on paper, the old world versus the new world. This is really familiar language to us now, but it was invented in this moment. The new world was now seen as land that could be claimed. It was fair game to go conquer because they didn't have big armies or a Christian king. Forget trade with the East, said Columbus. There's a bunch of land that we can go take over in the West. And the race was on. Spain and Portugal didn't want to fight with each other over all this land, this conquest that they were about to undertake. So they got together and they drew some lines. No, literally, they just drew two straight lines. We have Africa, we have Europe, and then we have this line. Everything left of this line is Spain's. Everything to the right is Portugal. This is literally one of the original maps where they actually drew these straight lines and divided the world into two. But let's look at this on a nicer looking map, please. There we go. Now we can see very clearly. Oh look, now we understand why they speak Portuguese in Brazil. So Spain and Portugal now have their spheres of the world that they can go conquer. They didn't ask anyone, they didn't negotiate with the locals, they just drew these straight lines. The Pope actually helped them broker the deal. Classic. But again, this is a huge thing that I want to explain in this series, that these were not just lines. They weren't just like lines on paper. They were actually a shift in the paradigm, a new way of thinking about the world. No one making any resistance. It was a story that Europeans could now tell themselves. Old world versus new world. Claimed versus unclaimed. A new way of thinking. Think I'm being overly simplistic about this? Let me show you something. 1, 2, 3, 4. These were a juicy find. I found this amazing Portuguese nautical atlas. It's a bunch of maps that the Portuguese Navy drafted up right after these two lines divided the world between Spain and Portugal. And it is an amazing series of maps, but not only because it's visually stunning, but also because it lets us into the mind of how the Portuguese saw the world side of the line. The status of this land, according to the fantasy of the Portuguese, changing from unclaimed to claimed by men on ships with Christian crosses on their sails, showing up and planting flags. This was like playing a board game to them. Here's another page. This one's a close-up on Brazil. And look, we've got people over here. We've got dark-skinned, naked people with primitive tools and no homes. It looks like down here in Brazil, they spend their days chopping wood naked and dancing, all while being gazed upon by fantastical birds and dragons? This was an official naval atlas drafted for the king, and if its message wasn't clear enough on how these people should be depicted, the atlas has a little info box up here where they say that the Brazilians are, quote, savage and very brutal. This is one of the first atlases ever made, and it wasn't really a navigation tool. It was much more a declaration of a new way of seeing the world. Unclaimed territory, subhuman people, all of it up for grabs by Christian boats. So yeah, this is how it all started. Under this new paradigm, both empires expanded very quickly, forcing the Spanish and Portuguese languages across the ocean. mining vast quantities of silver, creating plantations for tobacco and sugar, and in the process massacring the people who were living in this new world, both with their weapons but also with their European city germs that the people being conquered didn't have immunity to. I mean, this whole thing started with curiosity, with a thirst to get in on the trade in Asia. But soon, as this fantasy of unclaimed land came into the picture, the goal shifted, the project pivoted, and soon Europe was telling themselves a new story, that they, enlightened Christians, were entitled to claim it. And while this story starts with Spain and Portugal, soon it spread. Other European countries poked their head up from their farm work and said, hey, we're white Christians also. We know how to sail. We want in on this story of unclaimed land. And that's the next chapter of the story, one that I will tell you in the next part of the series.
That is it, my people. That is how the Europe steal the world. Not only the Africa, but the world entirely. They steal half of the world. Now start claiming, naming, and they're doing many things throughout the world. Starting from Portugal, Africa, Asian, and other parts of the of the continent. That is how they steal the world. But coming to Africa, I would say they drag Africa. Many of the colonial masters, they drag Africa to themselves. Everybody drag Africa, divide Africa into their own colonies. French, France, Portugal, Britain, both US, and everybody is now seeing how China and America is trying to take their own parts. Mostly the China is trying to take their own parts in Africa. So to recolonize Africa is what is going on as for today. Because the first colonization, it is just a few of the colonial masters that grab it. That is why you see many of the country we have in Africa, they are suffering from these colonial masters. They are in their home controlling what is in African continent, and nobody is talking. Once you speak, they will find one place to hang you, and that is how it is, the whole of African countries. So in fact, the Europe, they have done a lot, and they have done a lot to African continent. And then I would say time have come for the people to start understanding where they belong to and start to understand things they need to do to reclaim their origin, their land, and their place, so that the war, fight, and everyday war is going on in Africa. Time have come for them to end and to stop it, to understand where they are coming from. The days of colonial masters and recolonials have gone. Well, I would like to hear your comment down below. What do you think about the whole thing going on? In our next chapter, we are going to discuss a lot concerning how the Europe drag African to become their own and share the boundaries of Africa into their own boundaries. So like, subscribe, and make sure you share it to go around, let others see and learn from this. We'll say thank you for watching.